Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour at undefeatable prices every day. Shop at Academy locations throughout Ohio, including Zanesville, Springfield, and Boardman. Fun can't lose, and neither can you with tailgate gear from Academy. Go to academy.com today. Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. I'm Spencer Holbrook. We are on the other side of Ohio State versus Texas, 14-7. Ohio State, the victors. The victory bell was rung before the game by Archie Griffin, rung after the game by God knows what fraternity brother who gets the honors of doing that. But in any case, the Buckeyes walk away with a 14-7 statement win over number one Texas. Mick is here. I am here. Mick, how are you doing? Happy Labor Day. We are laboring on Labor Day because college football is a Labor Day sport. So here we are.
Yeah, it's good. You and I did the Monday after last season a little bit. I'm excited to be back and doing it again because now we have a good bit to talk about after, a Matt Patricia debut, a Julian Sayin debut, and a Buckeyes win. Gives you a lot more content and things to discuss.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about this one because I have two things to talk about today. I am here to talk about Julian Sayin, and I am here to talk about Matt Patricia. There is a lot to get to, and we will get to a lot of it over the next 3 weeks because we've got Grambling, then Ohio, then a bye week before they go out to Washington, and Lettermen Row will be there for that. But for all of it, really. But we've got a lot to break down with Ohio State, Texas. I want to talk a lot about the offensive line and the run game. I want to talk about James Peoples' shortcoming and maybe pressing a little bit. I'd like to talk about C.J. Donaldson and the carry split there. But we're not going to do that today. We're going to just focus solely on Julian Sayin and the defense being in the spotlight because those were two of the big stories of the day. Mick, I'm going to give you the option. Would you like to talk about defense or would you like to talk about Julian Sayin first?
Let's go ahead and let's start with the offense. Offense first.
Okay. All right. So, Mick, on Monday morning, I woke up and the first thing I did was I watched every Julian Sayin throw. There were 22 of them. He had 22 pass attempts. 2 of them do not show up in the box score because they were on penalties. Defensive holding, I think there was another one in there. I charted all of his throws. He either got a check mark for this was a positive Julian Sayin play or an X for a negative Julian Sayin play. I want you to guess, Mick. He was 13 of 20 for $126 and a touchdown. But the 13 of 20 doesn't really matter because there were some drops. There were some oddities. Jeremiah Smith had 2 drops, one of which I think was a legit drop. The other one was just kind of meh. Of the 22 times Julian Sayin threw the football on Saturday, how many of them did he receive a good check mark?
I'm going to go with like a solid 14 or so. I think there might have been something where it was maybe just a little I can think of one play and specifically where I was like that it's got to be a negative, but I imagine there are a few others where you probably could have done a little bit better.
It was 17 by my count.
Uh-huh.
It was 17. The first pass of the game was a gorgeous football to Max Clare that was dropped on the sideline. Max Clare absolutely has to catch that ball. He threw a screen to Jeremiah Smith. One of my favorite plays of the entire day was Max Clare finding just a touch of grass and Julian Sayin rifling one in on a third down play early in the game to move the sticks. It was just a veteran throw between 2 defenders, found his veteran tight end and moves the sticks. That is Julian Sayin showing poise that we did not realize he might have had against the Texas defense. Here's the deal, though, Mick. I think this stat line is so misleading because Ryan Day and Brian Hartline drew up a quick out to Jeremiah Smith on the second drive of the game that was blocked up perfectly, and Jeremiah had to make 2 defenders miss, but it wasn't anything that we haven't seen from Jeremiah before. He was wide open. Julian put it on his hands and looked right where it should have been. And Jeremiah Smith just got caught looking upfield because he knew that he might have scored a touchdown. I think if Jeremiah Smith catches that ball, it's a touchdown from 65 yards away, 70 yards. That changed everything as far as Julian Sayin's stat line. I really, there might be some Ohio State fans that don't agree with this. I do not care about Julian Sayin's stat line in this game. He was excellent. He was absolutely excellent. He was pinpoint with throws that he needed to be pinpoint on. He evaded pressure when the time came for it. But maybe the most important and impressive thing that I saw from number 10 out there was he's facing one of the best defensive minds in college football, Pete Kwiatkowski. He's facing one of the toughest pass rushes in the game. He's got 2 brand new tackles, and there's even some interior pass rush that I thought was decent for Texas. At no time at all did I see jittery feet in a clean pocket from Julian Sayin. It wasn't that he was sensing pressure that wasn't there, like Arch Manning was at times. It wasn't that he was stepping up and making the pocket messy with a step up that wasn't needed to be there. He was as poised in the pocket as I've seen from an Ohio State quarterback since C.J. Stroud. And now that he's a start in, I'm okay with saying that. I don't think he's C.J. Stroud. But if you watch how poised and how good he was at going through his progressions in the pocket for a first-time starter against that defense and that pass rush, Ohio State has something here. And I think I was more impressed with Julian on the rewatch than I was in real time. And I praised him a lot on the field after the game with you. I cannot understate how impressed I was with Julian Sayin on Saturday. And I think it means great things for Ohio State moving forward.
I 100% agree. And when you mentioned that Texas secondary or Texas defense, it's not just Pete Kwiatkowski. Like, he's got players back there. Obviously, Michael Taft is a former walk-on, but he's got SEC accolades. Malik Muhammad's been a starter for them for multiple years at cornerback. Like, he did a good job on Jeremiah Smith. Grayson Littleton was a highly ranked recruit that's a freshman. Jelani McDonald. I'm not entirely sure who the other cornerback is, but like, they have a really talented secondary. And like you said, he did a good job of kind of just like Ryan Day mentioned it after the game. They probably could have put a little bit more on his plate. Brian Hartline kind of a selfless game, like making sure they ran the ball. Didn't do a ton of crazy stuff in the game, but he took everything that was in front of him. Like, even on the play to Max Clare, I think he could have been a beat earlier, but still he got the ball right where he needed to be. There was no real questions about his on-field performance. I don't think there was any questions about what he did even between the reps. Like, we talked about it after the game, making sure guys are hyped up, congratulating them on good plays, hyping up the offensive line, getting the calls in, because there was a lot of stuff that, like you and I talked about on the car ride home. Will Howard handled the protections and the blitz pickups last year, and I think Carson Hinsman did a lot of that this year. But there was still in this Texas game, but there were still multiple occasions where I imagine you see Julian Sainz pointing stuff out, trying to get the calls in because he's already processing this stuff at a high level. So there's the stuff that you saw in between the snaps that looked really good, and I think everything I saw from field level. You saw it during the snaps, and everything I saw at field level in between the snaps also impressed me. It was just box check after box check, even post game. I know he is not the most animated talker or gives the most colorful answers, but I still think he carried himself well, knowing that he's stepping in front of 40, 50 people talking about his first start and trying to kind of pick his brain about what happened. And he stepped up, just was honest, and gave answers that he was comfortable with, and it all worked out. He handled being Ohio State starting quarterback as well as I have to think anybody has in their first start, like from the time he walked out of the hotel until the time he went to bed on Saturday.
Yeah, it was a great day for him. I was super impressed. The one thing that we have to talk about with Julian is something, again, it was Stroud-like. And look, I put it on social media just to see the clip of it. I was impressed with it, but I also wanted to see how fans react to seeing an incomplete pass, but thinking that it was amazing. I'm getting feedback from Ohio State fans, and again, this is super small sample size. I'm not a social media celebrity. Fans are noticing, oh man, that's something that we haven't seen since C.J. Stroud. The slot fade to Brandon Inniss in the first half with Hero Kanu right on Julian's hip. If he doesn't get that ball out with his ultra quick release that everybody's been talking about all offseason, that's probably a strip sack or at least a sack, potentially a fumble. With a lot of quarterbacks who don't have the release that Julian has, it's probably a strip sack. The pinpoint accuracy, knowing that out of the periphery that he has a defensive tackle barreling down on him, and one that he knows in Hero Kanu, who really got the best of Tegra Shabola on that given play. And for Julian to still deliver that ball to Brandon Inniss was high level stuff because he didn't panic in the pocket. He just delivered a throw and expected to be hit. And he was hit. It was a great throw. I see a lot of people blaming Brandon Inniss for that. what the people don't see, because there's not a perfect replay of it, is a Texas defender hitting the ball out of Brandon Innis's hands. I don't necessarily put that entirely on Innis for not catching that. And I think that they're going to go back to that slot fade a lot when they get to favorable matchups, especially when you can put Jeremiah out there and Carnell now. The teams kind of know that you have to take those two away on the side. Like, you're going to see slot fades from Ohio State, especially if Julian can deliver strikes like that down the field. The slot fade is going to be a weapon for this team. It's one of my favorite plays in football because of the versatility, the matchup that you get on those slot receivers with either a nickel or a safety. I'm really excited about that. And the fact that we saw that Julian can make that throw so well with pressure in his face tells me that Ohio State's going to see that and know that it can go back to that well. Again, I'm not a film breakdown guy. I don't claim to be. But I think I've seen enough of these quarterbacks to know it when you see it. And the pocket presence is number one. The pinpoint accuracy is number two. I just think that Julian checked a couple of critical boxes that you really wanted to see. And if he can do it against Texas, who has Colin Simmons, who's an All-American type player on the edge, Ant Hill, who's an All-American type player at the middle of the field, and Michael Taft or Malik Muhammad, who are probably two All-SEC guys, to say the very least, on the outside, they've got hitters at every level of this defense. And I thought Julian was great on Saturday, given what Ohio State asked him to do. And I thought it was important that Ryan Day said after the game that if they would have asked Julian to do more, he could have, but they didn't. And so they know that he can do more. And I think this start and this performance gives them even more insight to the fact that they can do it.
100%. And then when you even talk about that, I think there's some ideas maybe with his stature and his body type. Could he air it out a little bit? I know the Cardinal Tate throw was a little bit underthrown. Probably could have let him a little bit more, but still, that throw, the Brandon Innis throw, like, he can air it out and kind of get the ball downfield when they want. They didn't ask him to do it a ton, but like you said, good touch on that Brandon Innis ball. And you're going to have Brandon Innis in the slot. Even if you put Max Clare in the slot, you can hit some of those ones maybe in the short red zone, like maybe a back shoulder or something like Max Clare, where it's not as deep, but you just kind of lob it up to Max Clare because he's big. And then it'll just be fascinating to see in these next couple of weeks. Like, they don't have any reason to really throw the ball around against Grambling or Ohio, but still, I think they'd imagine like to get some of these, like maybe like a 10 for 10 start for Julian, or like a 8 for 8 or something, a couple of drives, and he's just dinking it, zing, zang, like right down the field with hitting all these wide receivers. I think that'd be a good start for him going forward, just because you saw it in that third quarter leading up to the Carnell Tate touchdown drive. Like, he got in rhythm a little bit and he started feeling himself on those throws. And obviously it's difficult when you're playing a talented team like Texas. You don't want to come out just throwing the ball, and they had the battlefield position for a large part of that game, but he definitely feels like a guy that when he gets in rhythm, he can kind of just lock in, and you saw it on that third quarter drive there.
The other things that I wanted to just mention real quick about Julian's performance is there were some moments that I thought, like, oh no, what is he doing? What is he doing? And then all of a sudden it's a great play. He's got Colin Simmons barreling down on him in his own end zone, and he's trying to evade pressure, and he throws a pass, which I thought he was just throwing away. But in reality, he saw Carnell Tate the entire time, and it was only where Carnell Tate could catch it on the sideline to move the sticks, get him out of the end zone. Now, they end up punting on that drive. Doesn't really matter. But even in a field position battle, when you are trying to just get the ball out of your end zone, it's huge for your special teams and gives you 10 more yards for your defense to get the ball out of the end zone. And he managed to make a really nice throw with an All-American defensive end barreling down on him, only where Carnell Tate could catch it, and it was on the run. I was impressed with that play. And then obviously the touchdown, a lot goes into that. They knew they were taking a shot. I thought Carnell was pretty wide open, got behind the defense. All you had to do was really throw it up there. I actually don't hate where he put that ball. And it was a touch underthrown, but I don't necessarily hate that underthrow. And I think Ryan Day would probably agree with that, based on what I know about what Ryan Day says about quarterbacks. Like you don't want to overshoot that. And so giving your quarterback a chance, or giving your receiver a chance there, knowing that Carnell is going to go up and make a 50-50 play, which is not a 50-50 play for Carnell Tate or Jeremiah Smith. Like, I think I'm even okay with that. I'm not trying to make excuses. Obviously, if he just hits him in stride, Carnell's running up the south of Block O and celebrating with the students because he just keeps running. But if you got receivers that can make those kind of catches, trust them to make those kind of catches. So I was just There's a few plays that I think, there's one play, it's his 12th throw of the game. I didn't even write down who he threw it to. I just said bad. Like, there's a couple plays. It's like, hey, good teaching moment here. I know on one of his completions, I actually forgot to note which one it was. He misses Jeremiah Smith, who is wide open down the field. And Jeremiah was pretty upset about it, and that clip made the rounds on social media, and that's fine. They're going to talk about that. And Ryan Day kind of gave Julian an earful about it. Hey, we just had the best player in college football wide open. What are you doing? That's a teachable moment. So if you're going to perform this well and look that good against Texas, while also sprinkling in some of those teachable moments at times so you can try to execute it against Grambling and Ohio and gain some confidence before you go on the road to Husky Stadium at the end of September, I'm cool with that. I'm cool with any mistake that he made that didn't turn the ball over, because he took care of the football, he was good in the pocket, and he made timely throws. Everything else was gravy, and I love gravy. Okay, so that can wrap up the Julian stuff. I have very few negative things to say about his performance. I was just very impressed for a first start, the way that Julian came out and handled himself. And if that's too much praise, I'll wear that. He's going to struggle this year. I promise that he will. CJ had struggles in his freshman year, or in his second year, his first year starting. Will Howard had struggles last year. We know Kyle McCord had some struggles. Justin Fields wasn't perfect. So, there's going to be some struggles this year. But against that opponent in that moment, that game, you got a lot to work with there.
Yeah, and you and I spent time kind of looking over the PFF numbers, obviously grades, whatever you can kind of break that down. He graded out well, but also, like you mentioned, no turnover-worthy plays. Like, no, the ball never really even got put into harm in a certain way. So I imagine that's a big check for Ryan Day. And again, to go back to the in-between this now type of thing, when you have a guy like Jeremiah Smith, who's intense, the best player in the country, like when you have that play where you don't get the ball to him, after what we saw on Saturday, I think Julian Sayin has the intensity and the actual charisma to handle that with Jeremiah Smith and work it out with him, instead of kind of just turtling up and being quiet, which is what Will Howard had, which I don't know all the time if Kyle McCord had that with like maybe a Marvin Harrison Jr. I think when Jeremiah Smith comes over the sideline and says something to Julian Sayin, those two guys are going to be able to match intensity and talk it out, which is a big check from the leadership component, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like it. So let's talk defense when we get back on the other side of the break. But before we get to the defense, this is the break, I guess. Tailgate season is here. We've already talked about it a little bit. We got to talk about it again. Nobody can get you ready for game day quite like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from the top brands. Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, Ohio State, partial to Nike. We know that. But they've got Adidas and Under Armour if you fancy those things. All at undefeatable prices every day. Shop Academy locations throughout Ohio. Zanesville, Springfield, Boardman. They're making a big push into the great state of Ohio. We love that. Fun can't lose, and neither can you with tailgate gear from Academy. Go to academy.com right now. Get your sports and outdoor gears. Get the top brands. Grills, canopies, any tailgate gear you need. Mick, let's talk defense. You want to just start off with a blanket grade of Matt Patricia?
I mean, holding one of the best play callers in college football to 7 points and holding him scoreless for 50 minutes of a game. I have a hard time not saying an A, even though you gave up to the 7 points and you kind of had it there in the fourth quarter where you needed to get a stop. But even then, you dialed up the right thing to get a stop on fourth down. Caleb Downs makes a tackle. Was it CJ Stroud is just throwing Arch Manning around just barely enough where he can throw the ball out. So A for me on the defensive side of the ball, and I think you'd probably align up near there.
It was great. Yeah, give him an A+. Had Arch Manning in a blender. I mean, there's a play where, and I saw somebody, I think it was Ross Fulton. I'll give full credit. Dave Snake Benosin follows a receiver in man. That signals to Arch perfectly that it's man-to-man coverage. Corner follows. Both corners are on the same side. Man coverage. No, Ohio State drops back into a cover two. Arch has nowhere to go with the football. He doesn't know what he's seeing. There were times where with the sack, the Arvell Reese sack, where he pretends to drop back into coverage, the offensive line shifts over to help out because he doesn't have anybody to block that guard. And then Arvell goes around him and makes mincemeat of the tackle and gets to Arch Manning for a sack. That is high level NFL stuff, folks. This is an NFL defense in the college uniform. And put that on a first-time starter, and I know he started 2 games last year, but they don't count. A first-time starter in Arch Manning, you throw NFL concepts at him, he is not going to do well. Damon Williams is not going to do well against NFL concepts. He's a young quarterback. Bryce Underwood is not going to do well against NFL concepts. He's a young quarterback. There are plenty of reasons to think that this Matt Patricia thing is going to work for Ohio State based on one game, because Patricia got the absolute best of Steve Sarkisian and Arch Manning. If Arch is really, really good this year, I will not be surprised. I do not put Arch's struggles on Saturday on Arch Manning. Was he good? No. But how much of it was mental? He had no clue. The picture was cloudy all day because of what Matt Patricia did to him. And again, maybe we're getting too far ahead of our skis here based on one game. But it's a small sample size sport. We only see 12 of these a year, folks. And for Matt Patricia to do what he did against that opponent, and you looked forward at the opponents that they have coming up, it's not going to get much harder for Patricia. But if he can do this with these athletes and just let them go play, but also put them in a position where it's already cloudy for the quarterback pre-snap and half the work is done there, oh my gosh, like you're talking about some of those wizard qualities. You know, he was described as a wizard to me 2 weeks ago before the first scrimmage, or after the second scrimmage. I was like, okay, like, you know, he's confusing the Ohio State offense, but, you know, it's a first-time starter in Julian Sayin. You know, what is he going to look like against Texas? Is he going to shell up? Is it not going to look the same? Whew. That was high-level stuff from a high-level defensive coordinator that was doubted all offseason, and I could not be more impressed.
Yeah, I can only imagine being Arch Manning. Like you said, he started multiple other games before, but standing on the field, I'm looking at Caleb Downs, and he seems like he's turning around, like looking at the scoreboard, but in reality, he's talking to Lorenzo Styles, who's 20 yards down the field as a deep safety who we thought was who is designed and like stated as the starting nickel in this defense, but he's 20 yards down the field. You have these times where they're running off Edric Houston and Caden McDonald, and on comes Bo Atkinson and CJ Hicks, and you still have Peyton Pierce or Arvell Reese or Sonny Styles on the field. Like the personnel groupings, the way he aligned these guys, like from the field, it looked very confusing. Just as an observer, obviously Arch Manning knows a lot more about football than I ever could like dream of knowing. But it's just I can only imagine trying to read it and understand where all these guys are going, not even knowing where like they could be lined up from snap to snap.
And listen, I'm not trying to stir the pot here at all. I promise. But what did we hear about at the end of last year? Larry versus Jim Knowles. There's a little bit of a tug of war there. Well, Larry doesn't like to get out of his front, and you're going to play a nose tackle and a 3-tech and 2 down defensive ends. No, that did not happen on Saturday. Ohio State showed 3-3-5 looks with 5 linemen, but 2 of them were linebacker types. They showed times where CJ Hicks would drop back into coverage because he's got that semi in his bag because of his time as a linebacker. He understands drops at least enough to confuse a quarterback and make the picture cloudy. There were times where Ohio State did double 3-techs. I've never seen a Larry Johnson defensive line go double 3 techniques and spread out your guys into the B gap with a standing defensive end and a down defensive end. There were times where Arvell Reese, you had no clue what he was going to do, a complete wild card in this defense. I would even venture to call him a jack because of how odd what he was doing was. But it was just Matt Patricia cooking up a scheme that was going to confuse the picture for Arch Manning. At every level, he had an answer to cloud what Sark was calling and what Arch was seeing. And yeah, it helps when you've got 2 Velcro cornerbacks. Davison Igbinosun was wonderful in this game. Not handsy at all. In and out of the breaks. Tim Walton's talked all offseason. The biggest thing for Arch, or for Davison Igbinosun, was the top of the route not being handsy. He got to the top of his route and he was disciplined. He was good. He was running his feet. It was great to see. It was a huge plus. He's a day one talent in the NFL if he gets his hands clean. And they were clean on Saturday. Jermaine Matthews, the pass breakup that almost led to the Sonny Styles interception, I thought was a better play than the interception that he had. And the interception was damn good. If you're getting these corners doing that on the outside, and you're mixing and matching coverages and disguising things everywhere else, there's not a quarterback in the country that's going to figure you out. Maybe Garrett Nussmeier, because I think he processes higher than any quarterback in the country right now. But you're not going to see that quarterback until probably the national championship game. So we're getting ahead of our skis here, but like we only have one game to sample size, Mick, and it's the most impressive defensive performance I've seen at Ohio State in a long time, and that's including a lot of what Jim Knowles did, and I was a big Jim Knowles guy. So, much like my Sayin praise, I have no bad things to say right now about Matt Patricia.
No, and I full credit, like you said, Larry Johnson. A lot of the discussion last year was, Larry and Jim Knowles don't get along, or they're not going to align on some of this stuff. It seemed like Larry Johnson was fully bought in, and even like positioning stuff, like Edric Houston and Caden McDonald on the interior were great, like just individually snap to snap whenever they're in. But I think we would both sit there and say, if you're going to play Jarquez Carter or Tywan Malone, you should get them pass rushing snaps instead of run defense snaps. That's the majority of this. Like, they were very situational with how they were going to attack Arch in this like Texas offense. I think Will Smith Jr. was a backup nose tackle that you could play on run defense snaps, and that's majority what he got in as. CJ Hicks got a lot of like pass rush snaps. Bo Atkinson got a lot of run defense. Like, they were very intentional about how they played these guys, and that's why you can play 18 defenders and everybody grades out relatively well, whether it's a PFF or I imagine Ohio State grades out a lot of them highly. It's just they utilize these players that Matt Patricia's talked about it all season. Put players in positions to make plays and where they're the best at, and that's exactly what they did against Texas, and that's why the result was kind of what it was.
Well, and there were even times, Mick, where like, hey, we need a player to make a play. Who's going to make a play? Nothing Matt Patricia can call in the goal line is going to stop a quarterback sneak unless a player just goes and makes a play. And Caden McDonald, Edric Houston, and Caden Curry made a play. You need great players to make plays. And lost in all of the Matt Patricia hype or slander at this point. And I've got a couple of like banger hindsight quotes from people in my Ryan Day column on Monday morning about what was said about Matt Patricia in the build up to this game. Go check those out over at lettermenrow.com. $1 for your first week right now. If I can plug that. Well, yeah, I can. It's my show. But you need players to make plays. Caden Curry was excellent on Saturday. Edric Houston and Caden McDonald were great submarining and getting in there and making that goal line stand. Jermaine Matthews needed to make an interception. Hey, you can call everything you want, but the field position was way against Ohio State in the second half. Until when? Until Jermaine Matthews makes a play and completely turns that on its head. Then Ohio State goes down, uses that momentum, and the crowd noise to score a touchdown. So, it was great for Matt Patricia that he had 1st and 15 3 different times. But, hey, Ohio State's crowd gave him 3 false start penalties on Texas. Like, sometimes somebody just has to make a play, and that includes the crowd. Like, the crowd was making plays. 3 false start penalties is huge in this game. Ohio State had two penalties for 15 yards. Texas had 3 on false starts. So I'm just every bit of this defense. The only thing that I can think of, Mick, that I would like to see more of at Ohio State, you've got to be able to get pressure with 4. There are going to be times where you're going to have to get pressure with 4. And I think the defensive line is going to have to do a better job of getting home and creating disruptions for quarterbacks, because it can't always be Arvell and Sonny rushing the passer as well. And it can't always just be blitzing. But with this secondary, I think the defensive line has more margin for error when it comes to getting to the quarterback, because the secondary is so sticky and so good. Very last note from me, Mick, and then I'm going to shut up because I've been talking a lot during this episode, and I apologize. Caleb Downs, I cannot say enough good things about. He's an NFL player. He's now in an NFL defensive system, and he looked the part. There was a time where Devin Sanchez had no clue what was going on. He was lined up on the outside at corner, and I think it was zone coverage, because Caleb Downs comes up to him and is trying to tell Devin what to do. And I think Ohio State didn't have any timeouts at this point, or maybe there was only one. They weren't going to burn a timeout on this. And Caleb basically just pointed at him and pointed at the field and said, go back there. And they switched spots. And he and Caleb Downs switched spots because Caleb knew that it was going to be easier for Devin wherever Caleb was supposed to be than wherever Caleb was, wherever Devin was supposed to be. Caleb can do all of it. But he put Devin Sanchez in a position to be successful on the field in real time. That is not something that a college safety does. So, like, there was some stuff that Caleb Downs did that was super high level that film people will gush over, and that I was super impressed with. But that was just one thing that I saw that was really cool. Caleb comes up, he tries to talk to the freshman corner who's out there in a huge spot. Freshman corner doesn't really have a great grasp of what's going on there. Caleb completely switches positions with him. It's like, you know what, you do that, I got this. And it worked out. So just really high-level stuff from the Ohio State defense all around. The only thing I think they need more pressure with the defensive line, but maybe they don't if they're going to be able to blanket receivers like this.
100%. And a lot of credit, like you mentioned, Caleb Downs. A lot of credit to Jalen McLean too in his first start. I thought like PFF again, he had the highest tackling grade. Like there was a couple of those runs where it felt like Texas could break it for maybe an explosive type run, and Jalen McLean comes up and clips some ankles, and we're shut down, and we're playing second down and instead of 1st and 10. Like those guys have obviously it allows you to do a lot with your corners and your front end and your linebackers when you know, hey, if Texas or any other team that we play gets the ball down the field, Caleb or Jalen's going to be there in position to make a tackle. It's even the same thing on that 4th down with right there to end the game. Like Arch Manning made a great play to even get the ball off to that tight end, but who was right there on the tight end? Caleb Downs tackles him, brings him down short, hand up, game over. That's the ball game, and that's probably the podcast at this point.
Yeah, and same exact thing goes for Davison Igbinosun on the other 4th down. Somebody needed to make a play. That was a perfect ball by Arch Manning. Davison Igbinosun swipes it away, doesn't get handsy, and then he gets to do his celebration that I love. I don't know what it means, but I love it.
Credit to him and Jermaine as well. Like Texas runs a lot of screens. They want to get those corners involved in tackling. They step up, and I believe they had at least 15 tackles combined. I know Davison Igbinosun had 10 alone. I think Jermaine Matthews is up there as well. Like they those guys were all these defensive backs were put in a position to tackle and make plays, and they did exactly what they had to do to kind of allow these linebackers in front 7 to move around and do some funky stuff.
And lost in all of that, not only do you have Matt Patricia running NFL stuff, this Ohio State defense is really damn talented, and I think people lost sight of that in the offseason. They just saw 8 lost defensive starters, and how's that going to look? There's a
Just say it.
There's a chance that by the end of this year, this defense is better than last year's. There's a small chance. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but you have to entertain the idea of it at least because of the talent that's at hand right now.
It's interesting because they brought in Riley Pettersson to be a freshman this year, and you're like, if you look at the way the roster's composed, you're like, oh, maybe you would need a talented freshman linebacker or a talented linebacker next season to come in because you hopefully would have these guys back. But it feels like James Laurinaitis and this whole coaching staff had the foresight to be, you know what, if Arvell Reese gets on the field this year and gets to play at full capacity, we might not have him next year, so we need to go get Riley to be ready in his second year because we might not have Arvell or Sonny the year after. Because if Arvell plays the way he was, like somebody told me, when I was talking to him after the game on Saturday on the Ohio State's coaching staff, I said, is Arvell going to be a first-round pick? They go, if he stays healthy, yes. And it feels like if that's what he puts on the film for the rest of the year, it's a Malik Hooker one and done. Like, it was fun to see him play. You remember that one season type of story here in like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it's a lot of praise, but you beat the number 1 team in the country in front of your home crowd, and you only give up 7 points, and it was in desperation mode for Texas, and you perform the way Julian Sayin did in the face of the Texas defense. I have very few bad things to say. We do have to talk about the concern that is the run game. I know a lot of people are concerned about that. It's maybe a little of column A, a little of column B that we're concerned about a couple of the things we saw from the offensive line, but also let's give credit to the Texas defensive front. That's one of the best fronts in America. Hero Kanu was awesome. Colin Simmons was shut down, but I think there was attention paid to him that made other guys be able to make some plays. Ohio State gave up no sacks, so we can't really complain about the pass blocking, but the run blocking I think could use a little bit of work, cleaning up in the run game. And we'll do that here this week as we break down Ohio State, Texas, because there's not a lot to say about Ohio State Grambling. And we'll talk a little bit more about Ohio State, Ohio than we do Ohio State Grambling. But we're going to keep breaking down the Texas game at lettermenrow.com with Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. We're going to do this every Monday of the entire season. It's called the Monday After. That's what we do here. The Monday After, Ohio State 14, Texas 7. Buckeyes still not sure where they're at in the rankings. We'll see when they come out tomorrow. But for now, they're still number 3, but they've got the best win in the country, a win over number 1 Texas. That's Mick. I'm just Spencer. Thanks for being here. Go to academy.com. Get your stuff today. And we'll see you guys over at lettermenrow.com.